we interrupt this regular program to bring you a special report from WVIA, the Citizen's Voice, and the Times Leader.
Special coverage on WVIA of the impending flooding going on with the Susquehanna River reaching near record levels. This flood coverage is made possible by a special gift from the WVIA Board of Trustees. And I want to bring in now one of my colleagues, Mike Buffer, also with the Citizen's Voice. He was covering the West Side communities that were affected by the flooding today. And we are all here at the East Mountain Inn doing our best to put a news report together for tomorrow. We were part of the evacuation. You were out today covering some of the events. What'd you see?
Well, my day started off in Kingston, where I live, first of all, and I had to prepare to evacuate because I'm in the Agnes floodplain. So after I got my dogs shipped off to a friend's house, I went back to Kingston and then talked to people, planning, evacuating, moving stuff. A lot of people were moving their belongings up to the second floor in case the levees are topped or fail or get breached, and there is flooding in Kingston. The same was holding true in 40 Fort, and a lot of people, a lot of gawkers were kind of rushing over to the levee wall in 40 Fort to get a look at the rising river and seeing what was floating and flowing downstream. And then the police drove by and yelled at them, said, "We're not going to protect you if you get in trouble up there." And
well, a point about the gawkers. There were a lot of people out today, as you said, also on the Wilkes-Barre side up in Pittston, and the county officials really sending out a message to those folks saying, stay off the roads, get away from the river. You're causing some traffic jams for people trying to evacuate, and also, as you said, if you get caught in the stream, we're not going to help you.
Well, I also forgot to say, initially when I drove up to the back mountain, it was bumper to bumper traffic. I'd say around noon, bumper to bumper at Wyoming Avenue, traffic congestion everywhere. And then I'd say around 2 p.m. the traffic had alleviated, and it was pretty easy to drive around. And that's when I think a lot of the pedestrians and the gawkers started walking around. There was, in particular, when I went into Wyoming, a lot of people were at the 8th Street Bridge looking at how high the rivers were, and it was going into people's backyards. And not a lot of evacuees in Wyoming. And I made my way down to Exeter, and there were homes in jeopardy there. And ironically, a lot of the homes in Exeter didn't experience any flooding in 1972, and they were preparing to get flooded along Susquehanna Avenue. And then I finished up in West Pittston, where there was a tremendous amount of flooding, and that might be the hardest hit area in the entire county. I know it was interesting that the National Guard Armory was pretty much submerged underwater, and that was along
Route 11, or no,
Second Avenue, okay. I think Second Avenue in West Pittston. So, but it was very familiar sight. You saw some people with U-Hauls and planning and moving stuff and moving furniture, and you had a lot of people who were just kind of moving stuff upstairs to higher elevations, moving electronics and personal belongings just in case the basements or the first floor gets flooded. So there was a flurry of activity out there.
And Mike, as you know, and many of the viewers here know, the evacuation order originally was issued at 6 a.m. this morning for an 8 o'clock deadline tonight. Once the new forecast came in, that deadline was pushed ahead to 4 p.m., and as many as upwards of 75,000 people are affected by this evacuation order. And officials tonight are saying, if you haven't gotten out, maybe there's still time, get out, because the rivers are rising to, as the National Weather Service is projecting, to 40.8 feet, which is right near the level of the 1972 Agnes flood.
Right.
And as you were
it is worth noting that the levees are 5 feet higher than they were in 1972 also.
That's true, and in some areas it's reported that the levees are at 41 feet, but as Steve Urban, the Luzerne County Commissioner, noted today, that number might be slightly lower than what the levees actually protect to. In some areas, they might protect to 43 feet or higher to give a little bit of wiggle room, if you will, for a flood event as this. But as you were out today, did you see, I mean, for the most part, people were heeding the evacuation warning? They're taking this seriously?
Well, I think so. Based on the amount of cars and traffic congestion I saw around noon, I think most people were getting out and were en route around noon, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. It seemed like most people had pretty much fled by 2 o'clock. You know, and you did have a lot of people who were in homes where they felt safer, or they were ready to go. They were kind of walking around the neighborhood, seeing what was going on. I found it kind of interesting. You know, one of my stops was the in 40 Fort along River Street by the 40 Fort Cemetery, which is kind of known for the 72 flood because the cemetery, I guess there was a breach in the levee wall back in 72, and that cemetery, you know, bodies were flushed out of the ground from the flooding, and people were talking about that story. And yeah, I remember in 72 the cemetery, that's one of those stories that people always talk about.
Well, let's bring in Phyllis Brandwine. She knows all about the 1972 flood and this flooding event as well. Michael, thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
And Phyllis, you remember the 72 flood. How does this compare to that flooding event?
Well, during the 72 flood, my family, my husband, my 2 children, and I were evacuating, driving up Highway 315, and my children were very interested in knowing how the animals were being cared for. Yeah, exactly. And my husband said, you know, we're not going to have a flood. And if we do, I'll buy you a dog, because my children had been asking for a dog for many years. And so we got a dog, a beautiful basset hound.
That was the product of the Agnes turmoil.
Yes.
Now, from your perspective, seeing that flood and then seeing what's going on today, you live in Kingston, right? So that's right along the floodplain. How does this compare? I mean, there are dire projections. How do you see it?
Well, I think we're certainly much more prepared because of the dikes, and I think people are better informed and better prepared as a result of it. And I find this a much easier trip.
And you're here staying at the hotel tonight with your husband? And best of luck to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And just like Phyllis and her husband, we are staying here as well at Citizens Voice. We are in the floodplain, our newsroom, and had to shift operations quickly today, moving our reporting staff to a makeshift newsroom here in one of the conference rooms, and sending our editing staff and page layout staff up to our sister newspaper in Scranton. So we are working hard to try to produce our newspaper for tomorrow, and with keeping in mind that this river crest could come at 2 a.m., so we will be posting to our website, citizensvoice.com, and also to Twitter at Citizens Voice as well. I want to run through some quick facts about this flood situation before we go. There are shelters set up across Luzerne County. Many of them are filling, but as officials say, if you can get out, do it now, do it before the worst hits. Those shelters are set up at Luzerne County Community College in Nanticoke, State Street Elementary in the Wyoming Valley West School District, Pittston Area School District, although that shelter has been experiencing some crowding and some staffing issues, so there might not be space there. Lake Lehman High School, Dallas Middle School, Misericordia, Wyoming Area Secondary Center, GAR High School in Wilkes-Barre, and Solomon Plains School in Plains Township, also in the Wilkes-Barre Area School District. Also, Northwest Area schools, the high school there, and Hanover High School are set up as shelters, and there is a shelter space available for about 5,000 people, but more shelters could open as the night goes on if there is overcrowding. The county worked this morning to evacuate senior citizens. They evacuated people on dialysis with county vans and buses. And they are planning now at the EMA building in Wilkes-Barre. They are watching, and they are working their contingencies as the flood crests, or the river level rises. There have been some power outages associated with this event. PPL cut power to some neighborhoods in Wilkes-Barre that are affected by flooding near Solomon Creek and some of the other creeks. UGI has experienced some outages as well. And Right now, it's a lot of watching and a lot of waiting, and as we hear more, we'll pass it along in another WVIA special report. This is Mike Sisak from the Citizens Voice, and now stay tuned for this message from the American Red Cross.
This is Mike Miller from the American Red Cross. I'm here at the Pittston Area High School. We are operating a shelter here for anyone who needs it. We do currently have only about 15 or 16 clients here at this time, so we have plenty of room for anybody in the valley who is looking for a safe place to stay, something to eat, place to just get warm and relax a little bit. We have room, we have cots currently for about 200 people, so anybody that is in need of a place, we're ready and willing, welcome to have them here.
This has been a special report from WVIA, the Citizens Voice, and the Times Leader. We now return you to your regular program.